Well, moving on to the runners-up from last season, Arsenal. James, is this season trophy or bust for Mikel Arteta, do you think?
Yeah, I think well, yes, to some extent, in that you sort of can't keep spending 150, 200 million, talk about progress and not win anything. And I think a lot of this is tied up in, you could probably distill it down to the Gyökeres signing. That they were keen on a number of forwards. They obviously looked at Sesko extensively. I don't think they felt Isak was available at the start of the summer. Obviously, that looks like that may be changing with Liverpool trying to make a concerted effort to get him. But at the time, they felt he was probably beyond reach. And I think if you're going to then make a choice between Sesko and Gyökeres, I think what they've decided to do is go for the win now striker. They've gone for the one who's 5 years older, who's scored 97 goals in 102 games for Sporting Lisbon. Of course, there are doubts about whether he can do it in the Premier League, but he's the more bankable option for this season and next season than a Sesko, who could be anything, could be a fantastic player and could, of course, go and thrive and really explode at Man United. But I think if you look at the two now, you'd say that Gyökeres just being older and having done more in the game is a little bit more of a win now signing. And I think Zubimendi's quite similar as well. He's somebody, again, who would need to adapt to the league, but he's a player top class. Liverpool looked at him, thought they got him at one stage, I think a year ago, and obviously that didn't pan out. Man City were linked with him quite heavily. You know more about that than me, but a player who's attracted some real pedigree and is expected to come in and do the job straight away. And I think those two signings in particular, they're looking at as being the ones that can finally get them over the line.
Just looking at those two signings, and in particular the Gyökeres and Zubimendi, obviously Arsenal have been so close the last couple of years and just haven't got over the line. Do you think those two players, I mean, it's hard to say, isn't it, because you need to see them, in the Premier League and in Arsenal shirts, obviously. But just on the face of it, do you think those two signings are enough to bridge the gap that they've failed to get over the last couple of years?
Well, you would say from a defensive point of view, they don't really need to improve. They've had a very good defensive record. The fact of the matter is they drew far too many games last season. They didn't score enough goals, and they were quite obviously missing a sort of top class number 9. So from that point of view, all the logic points to, if Gyökeres fires, if they can get him playing and scoring the kind of goals, anything like the level that we saw that he did for Sporting, then they're going to be bang there, challenging for the league again. But I think there'll be a lot of encouragement taken from the fact that Gyökeres' first goal against Milan at the weekend was a Zubimendi cross, Gyökeres header. The fact that those two have combined already will probably get fans thinking, well, this is it now. Let's just do it every week, and job done. I think the big challenge, though, for Arsenal is that they're going to slightly change the way they play. From what I sort of understood from speaking to people on the tour and spending time with or just around the group in Asia, they're going to try and play more direct this season because they know that Gyökeres is that kind of forward. They don't want him coming deep. They're not looking for him to do the sort of thing that Kai Havertz does. They know that his strength is playing basically in between the two centre-backs, making runs in behind. And for him to thrive, they need to get the ball forward quicker. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that at home, a lot of teams come to the Emirates and they play very deep, the low block, the two banks of 4 or 4-5-1 or 5-4-1, and really just sit on the edge of their own box and say, come and break us down. And you do sort of think, well, Gyökeres, then he's going to have to work in tight spaces. He won't be able to necessarily run in behind and use those strengths to score the goals that we've seen him score for Sporting. So it does pose a slightly different challenge for them. But I think if they can be effective in that switch and they can be more direct, move the ball quicker and not play that sort of horseshoe football that we sort of see, obviously associated with City as well, where they kind of, they pen teams in and they move the ball around in that horseshoe shape, trying to find an opening. They can kind of get away from that a little bit. Then, they've got every chance of winning the league.
Just on that change of style, I mean, obviously you'll know more than me and you've been in front of Mikel far more than I have, but last season when all the talk was about a number 9, he always seemed a little bit resistant to sort of say, yes, we definitely need a number 9 because of the way that he wants to play football. He wants everyone who's sort of involved, everyone involved in the build-up, kind of switching positions, all that kind of stuff. You have Gyökeres. It does feel like quite a big switch in terms of the way that they're going to play. If he's going to play every week, which obviously until he actually does, we're not sure whether he will or not. Do you think Arteta is comfortable with that switch of style, having kind of tried to embed his old style in for so long?
Yeah, because I don't think, we're not talking about a massive change here. I mean, I think Zubamendi's the kind of signing who he will give you control in games. He's the kind of guy who will get you playing. They see him as a six who will rotate possession, inject the tempo into the game. Those games we're talking about really where, they've got sort of, they're going to have 65% of the ball before kickoff, really. It's going to be like that. And they've got to try and break those teams down and play with that element of control. I think you're still going to see a lot of that from Arsenal. But I think they have been guilty of maybe trying to over elaborate at times. Quite simply, I remember speaking to somebody out on tour in Asia who just said, "Have you seen this big change with Arsenal?" And I sort of said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Oh, they're shooting." It's sort of simple as that. They're actually taking shots from outside the box and being a bit more proactive. So it's not a kind of, it's sort of a recalibration. It's not a reimagining of the whole team, I think. So yeah, I think he recognises that something needs to change. That they've finished second the last 3 years. There's various different reasons for that, but the most obvious one last season was staring him in the face, which is that they know they needed a centre forward, and they've gone and got a guy who has done everything he could have done at that level in Europe. It's a goal a game, basically. It's a fantastic record. If he can produce anything like that in the Premier League, then they're going to make sure he's got everything, all the ammunition, rather than trying to fit him in. I think that's the big thing, is rather than trying to fit him into what they're doing, they're going to adapt to him. So he's going to be absolutely pivotal to everything they do next season.
I mean, you spent a lot of time with Arsenal in Asia. I always find that, being with the teams in pre-season on those tours, you get a sort of fair idea of what the mood is, kind of expectation, aims, just feeling them on the group. What was your kind of takeaway from being with Arsenal in Asia?
That they're very excited and very optimistic. You sort of look at some of the other teams. I mean, some of the teams they played, Newcastle being the obvious example, and the absolute sort of mess that is their transfer window. Yeah. And you look at what Arsenal have done. They've managed to get their big targets in. Okay, they wanted Gyökeres on tour from day one. It didn't happen. He joined sort of halfway through, but the fact is they got that deal over the line. They've got Zubamendi done early. They've signed Mascaro, who's a young centre back who they really like. They've kind of done, and even Kepa, signing Kepa at 5 million is a really interesting signing for me, because this is a manager who's talked about substituting goalkeepers in the past, and you've signed a guy who is still the world's most expensive goalkeeper and was playing every week, for Bournemouth last season on loan from Chelsea. Is he really going to come in and just accept playing maybe 3 or 4 Carabao Cup games and maybe the FA Cup third round? What they're trying to do is inject that competition, take it to another level in all departments of the team, and they feel they've done that. They feel they've re-energized the group. I think that was a key part of it. When you finish 3 runners up in a row, I think there's a feeling of, is this glass ceiling above us unbreakable? Are we actually good enough? I think they really feel like they've re-energized and reinvigorated the group with those new signings, and the fact that they've got them in early and been able to integrate them, I think they feel they're in a strong place to hit the ground running. Difficult place to go to do it right at day one at Manchester United, and they've got a tough start. Let's not forget that they've got Manchester City. They've got to go to Anfield in August, at the end of August as well. So it's a very, very difficult start for them. But I think they feel they're in a good place to give it the best shot.
Obviously, $1 million question to end on Arsenal. Do you see them getting over the line? I mean, it's daft to talk about what a successful season looks like for Arsenal, because obviously it looks like you have to win the Premier League. But do you sense that they are right there, maybe to challenge Liverpool this season?
Yeah, they are. I mean, I've never predicted that Arsenal would win the league. And I find myself inherently feeling that I can't do it now, because they always seem to find some reason not to win it. I think without wishing to hedge my bets too much, you just sort of feel that if Liverpool end up getting Isak, I mean, it's such a game changer in terms of the overall profile of that squad and the strength and depth they have. And, you know, the fact that Arsenal would have, I think if they thought Isak was available, I think they would have really tried to go and get Isak this summer. You know, and if you compare Isak and Gyökeres, okay, on paper, there's probably not a lot between them purely in terms of goals record, but, you know, Isak's he's just got that little bit extra, you feel, doesn't it? You just feel he's that kind of signing that can go and win a title for you, almost a bit, not quite Robin van Persie for United, but it's that kind of feeling that, okay, this is serious now. Not only
if they done like that, it's a statement like that if they could do it.
Yeah. So I think if Liverpool get Isak, they absolutely have to be favourites. But Arsenal are settled, they're stable, they're confident, and they've got their own number 9 who could come in and absolutely tear it up. So they're in as good a position as they've ever been under Mikel Arteta to go and win the league. Whether they see it through this time or whether they find another reason why they can't, well, we're about to find out.